I have been doing the whole YouTube sort of Procreate tutorials now for over 4 years, weekly release every single week for 4 years, from start to current week, no gap.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Sketchwave, our weekly show where we talk all things Procreate and digital art. My name is James and my co-host is the one and only JoelCreate. Now, things probably, if you're a regular viewer of these episodes, already look a little bit different. I'm not normally the one that introduces. That's because we have a special episode where we're doing a deep dive on Joel. Now, we've been promising it for a long time, and rather guiltily, I have to admit that I've been stalling on this one. But we've got our act together. I've got my act together, and I've kind of rehearsed that intro script. You wouldn't believe how many times I've practiced that already. It's ridiculous. But anyway, we're doing it, and yeah, flaws and all, just bear with me if I make any errors. So before we get onto the content of the episode, how are you, Joel? How's your week been?
Very good, mate. Yeah, just working on content as per usual. Yeah, standard procedure, really. How are you?
Yeah, pretty much the same. Doing a little bit of work at home, decorating, doing a mural. But yeah, other than that,
Nice.
it's been pretty good. So, like I've already introduced, we're doing a deep dive on Joel this week. Do you want to introduce yourself and your content? I mean, before we get to that, I think most people probably are going to be a little bit familiar, but would you get past the obvious anyway, in case some people are new to the channel? So would you like to introduce yourself and what it is you do?
Well, okay, yeah. It feels weird being on this end of it. It's very, very strange. But yeah, as most people will know, my name is Joel. And Joel, I have a YouTube channel called JoelCreate. I am 31 years old, and I have been doing the whole YouTube sort of Procreate tutorials now for... I've been doing it now for over 4 years, weekly release every single week for 4 years, from start to current week, no gaps in between, which is really cool. Something I'm very proud of. I teach people how to create all sorts of content in terms of design wise, so sort of artistic pieces using Procreate in step-by-step tutorials that are not only available completely for free on YouTube, but there's also tutorials that are available on my Patreon. I'll leave it there because no doubt we'll get into sort of how the YouTube started later on. So yeah, that's pretty much the summary. I've got 2 beautiful dogs and a beautiful wife as well. Not in that order. Should have been the other way around, but you know, I won't send her the link to watch this.
That's great. So in terms of, like, you know, most people know what your current kind of, you know, who you are currently. But if we were to go back and sort of think back in the dim and distant past, although it's not as dim and distant for yourself, you're only 31, you know, for me that seems like nothing. But yeah, in the dim and distant past, what was your kind of start and interest in art? What was that like from an early age for you?
For me, when like being a kid, that every kind of male family figure in my life, my dad and my granddad, they were both very artistic people and like very creative people that I think there must be something potentially in the blood maybe that just sort of trickles through and made its way down to me as well. But as a kid, like my art, you know, when I think back to when I was really young, like, you know, I can remember specifically like my granddad, you know, painting. So he lives up in Yorkshire, up in your realm. Yeah. And we'd go up to visit, and, you know, he used to be a police officer in his early years, and then towards his retirement age and retirement, he has started was painting all the time. We'd go up there, and you know, he'd have them on the wall all the time and constantly be surrounded by them and just showing me the work that he's been making. And I remember specifically, you know, one visit up there, and my sister and I, you know, we sat down and he said, I've got you 2 canvases, 2 easels, we're going to paint and put some flowers in front of us and a vase. And God, I wish I had the photo to show, but, you know, we both sat down and painted that. You know, my mum went out for the day shopping with my grandma and stuff. But it was great. And, you know, that, I think having people in your life that you look up to that have that artistic creativity, no matter what, because it was traditional sense for him a lot of the time as well. Should I say, and painting, that, you know, you have that. And then not only that, like I remember, you know, my dad, you know, he's not here anymore, and this question I knew was going to kill me a little bit, but I'll get through it. He used to be like so creative, and in his early years, like a bit younger than what I am now, he used to create the signs for the pubs.
Right.
And would paint them by hand, and then clear coat them and whatnot, and they'd all be hung around all the pubs
It's really cool.
In the area. And it used to do loads of them, and you'll be able to see them on screen as well. And there's so many that he did. One thing specifically I remember, and I think this sticks with me because of like a creative level. On the side of one of the pubs, they wanted to do some sort of campaign as to not drink and drive.
Right.
And what they did was they got a car and they cut it completely in half. You'll be able to see it on screen now.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it.
Cut it completely in half.
It's a real
put it
car
up against
then.
the wall.
Okay,
It's a real car. And they put it up against the wall, and he painted around it as if the car had crashed
really
into
good.
the pub.
Yeah.
And for me, the creative side of that, it's one piece.
Yeah.
And he'd be very happy for me to say this. I know he would be, like, to refer to it as a piece, because it's, I don't know why, but I think maybe it's the 3D element of it has really stuck with me for some reason. But he loved it, and he loved kind of embracing what we loved as well. Like, there's some photos you'll be able to see now of, like, it was just just a small toilet, and we loved The Simpsons as kids, me and my sister. Okay. And then we came to see him one weekend, and he'd painted the entire toilet just in The Simpsons, and it was just like fun things like that, where it's like just embrace what you want to, like, what you enjoy, and just have fun with it. At the same time, some of the stuff he used to make was really cool. So as a kid, being surrounded by those figures that you look up to for artistic inspiration was probably quite a leading factor. But, for me as a kid, a lot of the time it was just, quite casual, I would say. It didn't necessarily sort of there was never any sort of pressure or anything like that from parents to be like, yes, they wanted to sort of nudge you in that direction, but it was always really calm and never very heavy pressure of like, come on, really, let's do some art. If I wanted to, I would do, and I'd have fun doing it. So I think as a kid, most importantly, it was just fun and very sporadic and spontaneous as to when it would get done. There wasn't any sort of rigorous kind of goal or objective really as a child.
It was just part of the environment that you lived in.
Yeah.
It's really nice. Yeah. So in terms of like how that became something of your own identity, what was your experience in the sort of education side of things? How did that transpire or develop? Education,
it was all just the mandatory things that you had to do.
Yeah.
For me, my secondary school only went up to the age of 16. So it was up until year 11. So you had to do art up until then. I believe it was mandatory. I can't really remember, to be fair, much of school, but it was, whatever was set out in front of you in school. They'd have certain things on the curriculum, I guess, for that year, and trying to see what kids flourish with certain techniques and sort of styles, and give you a little bit of everything. I guess it's like when I think about it, it almost reflects a tiny bit of like what we as tutors provide every week. It's like all these different styles for people to try and dip their toes into and try and see what they enjoy. You'll be able to see a photograph of a painting that I actually found today again, a painting of myself. And I must have painted this, I would have been around about, I would imagine, a bit younger than year 11. So it would have been around about, say, 14 or something.
Yeah.
But I'd never painted faces or anything. It's one of me, and it's just, I can see up close anyway that it was a grid system involved. So it's all of these things that you still there. I think we had our photos all given to us, I think it was, as a task, and then the grid was drawn on top, and then you just had to sketch it out and expand it onto a much larger piece of paper. But yeah, education wise then would have been solely just what we had to do. And then at age of 16, when I left my secondary school and went to my sixth form, art didn't really sort of come into it at all. When I was when I was about 16 and leaving school, secondary school anyway, my focus was, as a kid, maybe quite commonly, it's just like sports, like heavily with my sports and playing, but also like having fun with friends at the same time. You get to that stage where things maybe start to focus on the social side of things more so than the educational side. So for me, there was nothing else after that. There's no university, no college, no none of that. It was simply then a switch to using digital programs like Photoshop and GIMP and anything I could get my hands on that I could be creative with, I would have been doing in my spare time. And it, don't get me wrong, like up until like the age of 16, it wasn't just like football and stuff like that. It, in my spare time, I would easily be on my computer at like, 9 o'clock in the evening, and I'll be on it till 2 o'clock in the morning, just gone down an absolute rabbit hole of, what can I do in Sony Vegas, the movie sort of cinema making program,
creative.
Or it would be Photoshop.
Even beyond GCSEs, just the UK
Absolutely.
qualifications, isn't it? Yeah, you're still doing
stuff. There's always been something there. Like I'm always doing something creative. So I must admit, like we set out the questions for this show, and it's one of the things I was kind of a bit not nervous about talking about, but you can kind of get a bit of an imposter syndrome of you don't have the backing of a degree or a college, award or anything like that to then back up what you do here on YouTube and what you create every week. Obviously, the content sort of speaks for itself, but yeah, it is an interesting kind of topic, and maybe we could cover it again in the future, I reckon.
I think it's about you, but I think from my experience of art education, it doesn't necessarily translate to what you do in art in your career or in your pastime anyway. It's a very niche thing through education, and in all honesty, they don't necessarily teach you the actual skills they're required through your own endeavors anyway, aren't they, for the largest part. So in terms of beyond the education, did you get to use any of the stuff in your work at all? How did it filter through into your employment in any sense?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I have to kind of also sort of put a line in the sand here of then, we were talking about sort of, I would always be messing with like GIMP or Photoshop. GIMP, by the way, is just a graphic interface manipulation program. It's just a really awesome tool. It was a free version of Photoshop, essentially, back in the day. I think it's still going. But the fundamentals of digital was sort of taught to me through that myself. And again, just being like on YouTube, and there'd be a person that says, you can create this. And then you follow the steps, you create it. And then it would never, ever just end with that. I would always go, well, what... I now understand the steps involved. Yeah. How can I then do something different with this and also change it and actually add this and add that and subtract this and just make it I would not stop. Like I really sort of have really understood more so now about the fact that in every step that I've done throughout sort of my creative journeys, there's always this relentless need to be creative, and it's like an itch that you can't stop or an energy that you have to bring down. You have to kind of chip away at it. Otherwise it becomes quite an irritant almost. But then, Photoshop, most importantly, there used to be a website called Bebo back in the day. I've mentioned this loads of times on the show, but for people that are just tuning in, Bebo was like alongside MySpace, and Bebo, you would be able to, it was a social network, and you'd be able to put skins on your profiles, and your profiles, you could pick a skin that was like, I don't know, Iron Man or something like that. And there was a banner image, and there was sub banners, there was borders, all sorts of things that as a creative, you could create skins yourself, upload all the individual images, and then people can apply that to their profiles. And when I think about it, that was probably my first real dip into creating content and it socially being shared and growing something, because I would create skins all the time, all around football most of the time, and they were being used by thousands and thousands of people, and you could see the number, and you could see how many profiles it was on, and it was amazing. It was like the drug that we have here for YouTube. It was like, okay, cool, Rooney just scored a goal and the celebration was iconic. I need that photograph. I'm going to cut him out. I'm going to apply all the lightning and fire and everything like that, and the cool text effects, and I'm going to upload it as quickly as possible. And then it would be on the profile, and people would just immediately swarm to it. They'd all want it because it was the latest goal that he scored or something like that. And it was amazing. Like, it was just so fun. And I when I think back to it, like I said, I think that was like my first real dip into this kind of like world that is just in a slightly different form now. So moving on then into kind of how I use that then in terms of like career wise, learning what I then learned by just creating content freely, like in myself, like these Bebo skins. I would know how to create all sorts of elements and content that I was able to design websites. And more importantly, I worked in retail for quite some time. And then my friend, his dad owns a app development company, and it was a big company as well. And it was great. And he pestered me for quite some time to come and join. I was a bit apprehensive of doing it. And then when I did, it was great. I was designing apps. I was designing websites for a living. I still do it till this day.
How old were you when you started down on that kind of?
So that would have been, I've been at the company now nearly 10 years. So I was about 22. So I was in retail roughly up until about, 21, 22. So that's only about sort of four years, I guess, something like that. And yeah, I've been doing that now for about 10 years, designing apps and websites. And it allows me to still be creative in a little bit more of a restrictive space, because you're working to somebody else's goal and somebody else's vision. You know, I've got an app that I want and it's going to be based around X, Y, and Z. And you have to think about how you could create a logo, certain elements of that. You know, creating a logo sounds very simple, but there's so many factors to think about. And especially when they're going to run away with
logos, isn't it? It's easy to create bad ones, but ones that actually do the job effectively is a real art, isn't it?
Yeah. So all that self-taught content just allowed me just to be able to say, yeah, I can do those things. And like, if you know how to use a tool like Photoshop, you can apply it majority of the time to every space, whether it's, whether it's photography or, designing content for whatever it may be. And I'm very pleased that all that time that I put in those like stupidly late nights creating content paid off as a living as well.
So how did you, I mean, you've mentioned Photoshop. I mean, how did you first sort of encounter and discover digital as a format? Because you've done traditional, obviously, at high school. How was where did your journey start with digital? And I think you've kind of touched on it there a little bit, but...
Yeah, digital would have just been on my computer at home, and that was it. Like in terms of, what I mentioned there about sort of GIMP and Photoshop, those would have been those kind of experiences. Would have just been messing around on my own. But do you mean as in terms of like Procreate and the iPad? Or?
Well, I guess that would have been, yeah. I mean, I was the same. I was using Photoshop first before the iPad and Procreate was really a thing. But I guess you're the same, really. I think most artists probably start on Photoshop to some degree. You're using graphics tablets and things like that, or
nope, never used a graphic tablet. The thought of using the ones without the screens as well is pretty like a whole nother skill set to try and use. I would have to have one with a screen underneath it, but no, I've never used a graphics tablet.
So when you were using Photoshop, was it not necessarily drawing? Was it more image manipulation and
a bit? Well, using the mouse as a some sort of creative, but majority of the time maybe you could lean it towards more sort of quite structured content, like you say, like photo manipulation or designing a website. Not necessarily, it doesn't really flex too much in terms of like painting as such. It's very sort of strict in terms of buttons and whatnot, and following just a design language that you've created for that client.
So that's cool. So how did it then kind of progress onto posting content for YouTube, and then presumably a little later than that, Patreon? How did that begin?
So at the end, sort of towards the COVID was in full flow. And I remember a friend of mine, he said, we're talking maybe 2020, 21, I think, somewhere around there. A friend of mine, he was talking about creating a website, and obviously with all the skills that I've already got, I said to him, I can help you out, we can work something out. And my goal, I knew straight off the bat that whatever money I made from that, I would buy an iPad and an Apple Pencil and Procreate. I don't know. I can't remember what led up to it. I think probably because we were all at home for like just days on end, and just like seeing content maybe online, maybe inspired. I definitely think that I would have seen some TikToks of sort and been like, this looks really cool and really interesting and fun. And then typically, like I normally do, I would have done hours of research into it and looked into all the different tablets, etc. But I said, I am going to be getting an iPad. It doesn't matter which one, based on the work that I do here and the money that I make from it. So I did all that work for him. He paid me quite quickly, which is great. And then managed to buy myself an iPad. And from there, it was just drawing and having fun, especially with like the lockdown at the time. I had a lot of time to mess around with it and really, like when you get a new toy as a bloke, a lot of the times you just want to mess around with it and keep playing with it and just see, what you can do with it. So for me, I had loads of time to do that, and just it felt very natural very quickly to do it. And also the freedom of being able to just use a pencil as the input device felt very natural and very expressive. So I carried on just creating content. Shout out to Flo. I followed some of Flo's tutorials right at the beginning. Just learnt the basics and fundamentals, and standard kind of, just like I would imagine like 15 years difference of watching that video, well, not 15, 10, and then being like, right, I understand how that was created now. I understand the steps involved, like the clipping masks and the, alpha locks and everything like that. Okay, cool. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to go find another image of something else, whether it's on Pinterest, and not necessarily like do something completely scratch like we do now, but like see something and be like, I'm going to work out how to break that down and create that using the skills that I've learned. So then there was a long period where I was creating content just to draw, like exercises to myself of being like, this looks really cool. Let's break this down. Let's work out how to do that, and really try and quite quickly, I would say, in like a Procreate space environment anyway, like get to the point where you're like really challenging yourself and not following content anymore. You're challenging yourself to understand what your limits are and maybe, grow from there. And I was posting sort of my finished images on like my personal Instagram, and it was getting annoying for friends and everything like that. So I was like, right, I'll create a new page probably. And then in terms of how JoelCreate came about, it was a bit of a whirlwind, because it was New Year's Eve, and it was 2020 going into 21. And I came up with this design. You'll be able to see it on screen. And it was 2020, and the O at the end, the 0 at the end, was the COVID sort of virus looking shape. And then I did, typical kind of Procreate transition where you clear the screen completely and then reveal the other layer basically underneath. And the one underneath it was, the one had changed to a vaccine. It was, a needle. And posted that as just a quick bit of content. I don't know why I posted it. I must have been very bored. We weren't allowed out anyway. So I thought, I'm going to post it. I'll create a little page for it, called it JoelCreate. So anything I could think of at the time. Which, by the way, I missed a massive opportunity because my surname is Drew. So why didn't I just call it Joel Drew? It just doesn't make any sense. Friends tell me this all the time.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. So yes, I
did wonder whether you deliberately chose not to use your surname as a kind of keeping your private kind of profile separate from your YouTube thing. But yeah, obviously I've known that your surname is Drew, and it always occurred to me like, why? Anyway,
it could have been Joel Drew, or just Joel Drew that, or Joel Drew it, or something like that. But I've got the other channel called Joel Drew. I just, there's nothing on it. I just claimed it. But yes, so I missed a trick. I think at the time, I must admit, I think what you just said there very much was bang on, is that I wanted to have a bit of separation.
Yeah,
you don't know where it's going to go. You don't know who's going to see it. You don't know who's going to judge it. So there's a little bit of kind of, I'll try and sort of limit this a little bit and try and sort of keep it in its own little bubble. So yeah, I posted that TikTok and it did really well. And like, that's the only thing I posted. And I was like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to get my iPad and I'm going to just grab my phone and just hang it over the top. And this is just for TikToks at this point. This is not for anything else other than just creating a bit of brain rot content, as they call it. And just drew in the morning, created a very quick sort of video, put it online, did really well. So right, I'm going to draw this afternoon as well. Did exceptionally well. And I think like even the third videos, I think that got like 1 million views. Amazing. Which is just insane. Yeah. Because I think I was riding the wave of the very last kind of wave of people being locked down. So people were getting a lot of views because people were just simply online like a lot and watching a lot of content. So I got a lot of views out of that. And then, you get 1 million views on a video. You go,
yeah, I'm going to do more of that.
Keep going with this.
Of course,
So every day for the next like week at least, well, the next week, I was drawing morning, afternoon, posting it online every time. And it just kept going. And like I think the 5th or 6th video, it's now got 3.1 million views on TikTok. And it was like, what is going on? And it just grew so fast. I got, in like a space of a week, I managed to get over 100,000 followers on TikTok. I'd smashed all the requirements to start getting money from TikTok for being paid to do it. I thought, what have I done? Like, this is insane. And at the same time, I was posting those videos to my Instagram as well. My Instagram, out of nowhere, an account called Puberty, that's just like a kind of lad Bible style page, or I'm trying to think of an American version, but I can't off the top of my head. But they picked up one of my videos and they reposted it, tagged me in it. Out of nowhere, we sat down I remember on the sofa, and my phone's just going, it would not stop. And I was like, what on earth is going on? And like within the space of like an hour, I got like 5,000 followers on Instagram as well. And I'm thinking just like, this is all just going nuts. So then at that point, people are asking me, they're seeing the content. Bearing in mind, this is still only a week. This is like 7 days into the new year after posting the first one. People are like asking me a lot, how do we make these? Can you teach us how to make these? So I'm looking at that thinking, there's got to be some demand here, like for this content. Immediately rush to YouTube, create the channel, and just I think to myself if I'm going to do it or not. I examine everybody in the space. I watched countless videos of yours, flows, everybody in the space that I could watch, and just see how you were going about doing things. What are the principles that we need to follow? Oh, James isn't sharing the palette, but Flo is. I'll share the palette. that was the very early days when you weren't doing it.
Had a terrible audio as well, probably back then.
He keeps licking his lips or some mouth noises. I was like, I'm not going to do any of that. That's a running joke, by the way. If anyone watching this, we've mentioned it before. I'm not just being horrible to James. I created the channel, and then I remember we had a friend that was like staying with us for a period as well, and like living with us. And I went downstairs onto our kitchen table and dining table, and I put a tripod on, and the tripod arm was hanging over, and I had to weigh the other side down with books and coats and all sorts, and did the kind of typical top-down shot where there's a plant over there and there's some crayons or something, and just started drawing and just drew it. And she came down, the lady that was staying with us at the time, and she came down and she walked into the kitchen. I just had to sit there like just waiting for her to go back so it's peace and quiet and I can carry on again. And you can see my reflection in there because the lights were so bright and everything. Like it's clunky, but it's great. It gets people you going, and that's content. Where you have to start.
Yeah, people exactly. Are there for the lesson, aren't they?
And that video did well too. I'm not saying not millions of views, of course. YouTube is a much more defined place in terms of the content and the sort of people involved in it, such as yourself and Flo. And so and after that, I said it did well, and I said, well, if I'm making if I'm making money off of TikTok, not that this is the sole objective, but once you start making a bit of money, you can start to reinvest it. So you're making money off of TikTok. Okay, cool. And then people are asking for YouTube content, and I'm seeing the numbers come in. I'm like, okay, what's the requirements? I'm like, okay, well, I can stick at this.
Yeah.
Like I can stick at this. And it may, I would hear people, and typically what I would do is in that time, I'd be listening to content all the time, how to become a YouTuber, how to do it. And I'd watch just a relentless amount of content on understanding it. That's just the type of person I am. I don't buy anything unless I've done hours of research into it to know how it works and all its flaws, and understand then how I can combat those flaws and so on. And so, I'm thinking, okay, I can do this. And I would see typically that some people don't get like monetized on YouTube for sometimes a couple of years. You've got to get 1,000 subscribers on YouTube and then 4,000 hours of watch time. And again, not that money is the goal, but if you can get there, it starts to make the time that you invest more.
Of course. It means you could do more of it.
You get rewarded for it. And you want to do more of it. At the same time, you've been paid to create drawings that you love doing.
Yeah.
So I carried on doing the TikTok stuff, carried on doing YouTube, and just went for it, kept my head down and carried on. And at the same time, very early on, and when I say this, probably only 2 days later, I had one person reach out to me and was like, mate, how do I support you? And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, I'd love to support you in your journey. And I was like, do you mean financially? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, dude, I have no idea. Like I've literally only just walked in the room. Like I've got no idea. And he said, well, why don't you set up a Patreon? And I was like, okay. Well, I mean, I could do, but this feels very like grabby, but based on the fact that he said he wanted to support me. And I said, all right, fine, I'll do it and we'll see how it goes. And then before I knew it, I was looking at, again, the models of everybody else and so saw the exclusive content. I thought, well, it's doing well on YouTube. People are enjoying it. They want more content and they're already supporting me on Patreon. I had like 5 or 10 people supporting me without any content. I was like, I've got to reward these people with something.
Sure.
Before you know it, you're creating content on a weekly basis, not weekly, on a monthly basis, multiple tutorials a month on Patreon. And then we're if you just carry on, you fast forward all the way to where we are. We're four years into it, and Patreon over 130 exclusive tutorials at the time of this recording, 230 on YouTube, I think it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, hundreds of tutorials. You've
been very busy.
Hours and hours of content. So yeah, that's how we got here anyway.
Yeah. So obviously you're saying that, when you started during kind of lockdown or COVID kind of extended period, really. So you obviously entered I wouldn't say a crowded space, but there's a number of, at the time. I think
that's fair to say, though.
Yeah. So how would you describe your style, perhaps, that maybe differentiates you? Or, it could just be your artistic style, or it could be YouTube presenting style. You can take that question however you like, really. But how would you
I think
summarize?
In terms of content, at the beginning, a lot of my content is very different to the content that I create today. Far simpler. And, that was with strategy at the same time as a lack of skill, in a sense, at the same time. Because if you can create content that's for beginners, then pretty much you can cover the whole spectrum of Procreate. Yeah. You can cover everybody. If someone is super advanced, but they see a simpler design and want to do it, they know that they can achieve that. But also make sure that beginners can look at it and say, I can do that too.
Sure.
So with strategy, starting off at the beginning, keeping them a little bit more simple. I think at the time, if I'm honest, I think I had a bit of a style. And again, I'm just reflecting back to sort of the early part of the YouTube journey.
Mm-hmm.
I think the styles were something that was a bit different in a sense, because obviously, at the beginning, I do like cool neon designs and space themed, and I think it covered a space of maybe more boyish content, if that makes sense, like boyish, like kind of less of the kind of beautifully pretty cute content, and just a little bit different and just
more graphic graphic design.
And I remember people specifically saying that to me at the time, that like, I like your content because it does, I don't know why it's sort of stuck with me, but a little bit more boyish at the beginning. So beginnerish in a slightly different kind of space a little bit. And then now I think the content has changed far more, where I'm trying to push my limits a little bit. I'm trying to push the limits of a user a little bit more as well.
Sure.
Because
I was going to ask, how has your style changed? And, is that due to viewership and the audience and their kind of feedback, or is it algorithm based? Because obviously, as a content creator, when something does really well, whether you intend to follow that or not, it has an effect on you, doesn't it? When something does really well, you can't help but kind of be steered a little bit by that. To what degree, do you see a change in your style and your approach after being on YouTube now for a number of years? Can you chart that development? Or
yeah, definitely. I think again at the beginning it was with strategy, whereas I think it got to about a year and a half in, and I said, I'm no longer going to be drawing for strategy and for other people's requirements, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be drawing for me. Like, I want to develop as an artist. I want to just push myself. I don't like to be, I think there's very many people in this world that want to be sort of stagnant and not try and push the boat out a little bit here and there and learn something new and adapt and change as you go. So, for me, I wanted to just every time maybe just understand that I can push the needle a little bit, and just and I mean only a little bit, but week after week after week that changes. And before you know it, some of the content now, I'd be very impressed if I was looking back at when
Sure.
I first started to be like, oh, cool, you're creating content like that. That's really nice, and that's another thing. You have to be complimentary to your own work, really. We'll get to that sort of later on, but I don't want people to think I'm going at it from a what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of
being conceited. It's a. I encourage, having taught in the classroom, I think it's important that people pat themselves on the back and give themselves the credit for the successes they've had. It's fine to be a perfectionist, but if all you do is pull yourself down, then you don't aspire, you don't think you're capable of jumping to the next stage where you will get even better, do you? So you've got to stop and say well done to yourself, you do.
But I think also looking at the space, you look at the space and you got like yourself, Flo, Tati, just to name a few, there's so many amazing artists that you can't help but look at that and go, every time you see their work and be like, I need to do better. Like, not because as we mentioned it, like we are in a bit of a competitive space in a sense. Most of the time our tutorials will come out between a Thursday and a Sunday, and we are competing in a sense. And I almost want to retract that, because I don't like the word competing, because people will make time to do all of our tutorials. I know they do. And it almost sounds as if we're against one another, but we're all friends in this space completely. We make tutorials for our audience, and
but it might be that they follow all of us, and that they've only got a time in that week to do one of them, so they may wait until later in the week after they've seen them all and then choose the one they like the most. So to a certain point, there is an element of competition, but it's friendly competition.
Absolutely. And it pushes us all on. But I think that's to answer the question, how it's maybe been influenced, I definitely think it's less more algorithmic, but definitely more at your peers, and seeing the progress that everybody else makes and the stylistic sort of choices that people make, and saying, okay, cool, I see what you're doing and see the approach, what can I do? And also at the same time, as I said, drawing for myself, understanding what brushes I really like to use, what type of effects and styles do I really enjoy creating. At the minute I'm enjoying my charcoal content very much. I've got that going on. I really enjoy like the dry ink brush as well. Really enjoy that one, and just implementing that in different works, but also like different things, like adding in certain elements at certain parts of the design process that are just very much me. And I think that takes time, and takes time to build up. So I think as the time's gone on, it's just been more and more clear as to what I like to do. And I think the content has definitely changed in a way that I'm more casual with it, in a way. Like when I'm chatting my way through a 45-minute to an hour and a half tutorial and just talking my way through it, I can appreciate some people probably want to just maybe say, Joel, just stop talking for a bit. But I love filling the space. I love talking through what I do and trying to at least explain it and not give so much dead air. I want people to understand why I'm doing it. Also things I'm not trying to do, things I am trying to do, what I'm actually envisioning in my mind, how it's coming to life, and then on the screen as well. So at the same time, like I said, it gets more casual as time's gone on, because I'm happy to make sort of mistakes in terms of what I'm saying and just correct myself, but carry on the drawing. It doesn't make any difference. Just these little things here and there where I'm very comfortable in my space, and hopefully my audience is equally as comfortable just having a chat with me, albeit one way.
I think it gets to that point. I think you almost get to the point where you feel like someone's there with you, but you're the only one that's keeping the conversation going. So it's almost like it's quite an intimate thing where you just keeping the conversation going, and the other person can't talk. But if it was all too formal and with large silences, I don't think it'd have the same flow to it, would it, so to speak?
No.
So, what would you say your best or your most artistic strengths are? So, what are your biggest artistic strengths, would you say? And it's quite I want to put you on the spot really on that front, but
it's a good question. I'm trying to think. It's hard to sometimes think about it like that. Like, what is my strength in that place? Strength is the interesting thing here to think about. Like, what makes it like strong? What aspect would make it strong is what I'm trying to sort of define in my head. Because I know I know that I like to lean, and this might sort of cover potentially another question, but I know I like to lean towards a heavier style of contrast, because I like to really express highlights. that, to answer the next question, just to try and link the two together, that is my favorite part of the process. It's like, I think my strength is then, I'm happy to lean into quite dark colors and dark, moody sort of vibe to it, and not go to like a quite heavy saturation. It's more realistic in that sense. Maybe that could be, my strength, in the sense where I'm happy to keep it a little bit more realistic potentially. But creating highlights is my favorite part of the process. It's like typically like the last step for me a lot of the time, in terms of like each element of content, and creating that level of contrast between your highlights and shadows, for me, is just the bit of the bit of the process that is just so rewarding. And I see it mostly in the charcoal content that I've created lately, but also in landscapes that I've done, and going back through like a landscape at the very end, creating a color dodge layer. I typically love to do that, create a color dodge layer with a bright yellowy, orangey tone, and just going back through and highlighting blades of grass or a flower or a little bit of path or a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and just making it pop. I love that phrase, making it pop, and making it punchy is one thing I used to say at the beginning of I don't know if you ever found this, but I always remember like I'd say a lot of phrases at the very beginning of my Procreate like kind of tutor journey, and they would always get like brought up all the time by like friends or just messing around, and I'd always get the phrase punchy come up because I just use it all the time. But yeah, making things quite punchy and colorful is always my favorite part of the process.
Brilliant. So you talked about some of the things that you feel that you enjoy the most, and things that some of your strengths. How are you looking to artistically grow your knowledge and expand your knowledge? I mean, are there any areas that you feel you really want to, not necessarily need to, because we all have areas that perhaps we avoid when we don't necessarily want to either. But are there any areas that you want to gain more knowledge in, or something you actually want to do, rather than something that you say, well, I'm not very confident at that? What is it you want to do artistically?
I mean, we spoke about it before on a previous episode, that I wanted to include subject matter in there. But I think in terms of like actually educational side of it, I think I would be quite up at the minute for just paying for some courses from different artists and just understanding their processes, and seeing how they go about things, just to see if there's things that I'm not thinking of. I think for me, sometimes there's that little bit of doubt in the back of my mind in terms of you're self-taught, and are there things that you're categorically forgetting or not aware of when creating content, when creating these art pieces. There's always some sort of skepticism for me when I finish a piece of being like, would that hold up to a digital artist to look at? Like, if I handed that into a game studio, hypothetically, what would they look at? If I was the employee and they asked me to make something and that's what I made, would it stand up to at least the fundamentals of what should be there? So I think there's a lot of things there that educational wise, I would happily pay for some courses to just to understand all of those things, to make sure I can look at a design and check off those items and say, cool, I know I'm, elite, following the rules as such. So I think that's potentially where I'd want to grow a little bit. But I mean, in terms of like actually the designs, I've spoken before about maybe introducing subject matter into there, like people, but it would always be silhouettes, because that's not really what I enjoy drawing. To be honest, I think it's not that I don't enjoy them. It's just, when we create content like we do, we don't have time to put a person in there that, just looks awful in terms
difficult
of me
to teach,
curating something.
Yeah. It's difficult
and
to
it's hard to feel like you can.
Yeah.
It's hard to be confident about teaching something that you're not yet 100% on yourself. So it takes time to build that up. So yeah, subject matter in the long run, I think would be something I want to introduce.
Sure. So if you weren't doing the YouTube stuff and you didn't have this kind of online presence, how would you?
I mean, mad.
Work aside as well. So not even being creative in the work that you do currently as your job. Where would you channel that creative energy if there weren't the internet and there weren't, digital art, for example? Because we know that, you would probably doodle and do digital art regardless of the channel. But is there any other creative areas that, avenues that you do put your creativity into, or would do if you were because I folded into the question, if you were retired, and I know you're probably 30 odd years away from that, but, in a situation where you didn't have to do it as a job in any sense and you weren't teaching it, what would that look like creatively for yourself? What would be just the pleasure of it?
The first part of that, in terms of like what would I do if I wasn't like on YouTube and doing the content that we're making, I think is a really tricky one, because I think lots of things have maybe kind of just fallen my way in certain points to kind of guide me to where I am at this point, and just like a series of events that get you to where you are. But I think it's hard to answer that question, because I know that, like, even going back to one of the earlier questions, creating the content online for Bebo and stuff, I know what that felt like and the fun of that, to then try and say that I can't even imagine a space not doing this on the internet as such.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I could give you an answer such as like, I'd be creating canvases and selling them in a gallery of my own, but I'm not sure that still would be realistic. But I mean, to answer the second part much more easily, if, retirement from YouTube, hypothetically, whether it's this age or in 30 years, I think I'd just immediately dive into traditional art and just follow suit with my old man and my granddad, and just create content. I say content, create art for myself, to step away from a canvas and come back to it a week later and spend 13 hours on it that day, and then come back to it again whenever I want, and just create, slowly build it up. And I can never say it's done. I can keep adding more and more to it until I want to move on to the next thing, and just have your own little sort of studio space to paint. It would definitely be paint. It's one of my, I guess it would be oil paint, I guess. But yeah, I think that would probably be the right avenue, because I think we're all maybe born in certain ways and have to at least understand how we are as people to understand how to actually make ourselves the better versions of ourselves, if that makes sense. I know I need to do a certain amount of physical activity every week.
Yeah.
My mindset is always like, I've got to imagine these things as like, there's a tap running above a jug, and it's just slowly rising bit by bit. And then once it starts to overflow, that's when you get irritable. So for me, I've got like a physical one I need to exhaust. I've got just a mental one. I need to be thinking and have my brain actually working. And then I've got this creative one as well. And I know if they start to overflow, I know what it is, and I know I have to go and tackle it. And as I get older, I really hope that's not patronizing to you or anybody else. But as I get older, as I try to be as wise as possible and understand these things. So I don't think creativity is something I'll ever be able to turn off.
No.
So I think it has to be there in some format. I mean, I've spoken about recently about how I'm creating content on another channel recently, in a whole nother sort of space and niche. I can't stop being creative in that space. Like, I'm already like, typical me. I created 10 episodes in like 2 weeks. And so I've got content all the way through to like April, nearly May, because I just can't stop. Like, I have this creative itch and I'm enjoying it. I'm loving the process, and I just have to crack on with it. So creativity has to be in there somewhere, but the realistic way, if everything sort of disappeared YouTube wise and everything like that, it'd be just painting for fun.
So is that your main goal for 2025, or what are your goals for this? I mean, we're into March already now, aren't we? But
I was looking at this question, and I love this question because it makes you really try and think and focus on what you should be doing, or what at least looking forward a little bit. I mean, JoelCreate wise, we've spoken about how YouTube is very much like a marathon. So I'm going to sort of speak on the channel first. YouTube is a marathon, and I'm very much in the middle of it. Like, there's not really anything coming up that's going to be, interesting or like milestones or anything like that. It's just going to be, got to keep going, got to keep your head down, keep trucking along, and keep making your way towards whatever goal it is you want to get to. Typically for YouTubers, you want to hit 100,000, but then, you don't stop work when you hit 100,000. You get a little plaque and you carry on, and you have to keep working hard and keep going after that. My second channel, I really want to just keep increasing that as well. That's the cross-platform channel of digital art as well. But at the minute, I think probably this year is my like new Pokemon channel that I've created that I really want to try and push and have fun with and enjoy that process. There's things I'm going to be doing for that channel that I've never done in terms of content creation. And for me, it's exciting. It's fun. You know, I'm going to go to a convention at the end of May that I've never, ever done. I've never even thought I'd ever do. And I'm going to film it. I'm going to vlog it kind of thing. And I love that. You know, we used to go on holiday as friends, and like I would always create these videos of like all of us together, because at one point there was like, I think there might have been 14, 16 of us all going away on holiday together, and it was great. And I'd film it and create like a little kind of holiday video for us, and I would just enjoy the process of the filmmaking and stuff like that. So tell you what, actually, let me go back a question, because potentially it wouldn't necessarily be artistic. It would be photography.
Right.
And that is obviously art in its sense, because, and filmmaking, I love that. Yeah. Again, I could, there's always been something that I'm working on. You know, I had an Instagram page at one point locally. I won't say what it is, but it, in terms of the name of it, but it was about reposting content, like photographers in the local area, and also like businesses, what they were up to, and my own photography in there as well at the same time. And it was like this daily feed that you could get a photograph of the local area, beautiful photography from all sorts of different people. You know, it got really big. It got to the point where I was going to like restaurants and being like, oh, you know, ahead of time, I'd be like, do you want to work on any content? Because I'm going to be in there today. And like, I remember sat at a table having dinner, and like they just brings food over and be like, you know, as if for me just to take photos of it, put it online on my like Instagram, and just showcase it to everybody. And it was just free. And that was cool. It's like an insight into like the business side of it as well. But there's, you know, that's a photography based project of mine that I still own it, but you know, I don't do it anymore. I've got too much going on with all this, but there's always something happening. Bebo through to, you know, that Instagram account, through to Procreate accounts, now through to Pokemon. You know,
so you won't ever
I'm trying
retire
to test
then.
myself. No, I'll die at the desk. I'll die at the desk. In one of these recordings with, you know, so 2025, grow that project. But in terms of content, I just want to keep doing what I'm doing, mate. To be honest, it's just keep enjoying coming up with new different types of content to draw, but also understanding I can revisit certain topics and try and apply like different styles and different elements to it. You know, who knows, maybe there'll be some ideas that pop up during the year that can, you know, do something a little bit different, but more of the same, which I don't know whether or not is a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know. We'll have to see.
It's not entirely, it's never entirely the same anyway, isn't it? Like you say, if you revisit things, you add new elements, new approaches, new details, more depth. It's inevitable, isn't it? You know, that you bring more to the table. So what would your advice be to aspiring digital? Well, we'll talk digital mainly, because that's predominantly the space we're in, isn't it? What advice would you give to aspiring, I say young, it doesn't have to be young. We've done an episode on, you know, how people start in later in life, in retirement. What would you, so we'll just say aspiring artists, not young artists, aspiring digital artists. What would your advice be?
My biggest piece of advice for new artists would be look at content online, not with a comparative point of view, but look at it with a admiration kind of point of view instead. Don't look at work and compare it to your own. I love the phrase that comparison is the thief of joy, because it is. You can look at an artist that has been doing this for so long, and you're brand new to the space and think, I can't do this. I'm out of my depth here. This is just simply not so. I can't achieve that. But you can achieve that. You can achieve that, but you have to put the time in. And as long as you can look at your own work in a comparative point of view and look at it from the current piece to the previous piece and see what you changed, and maybe even not the previous piece, maybe even your first piece or 10 pieces ago, never compare your work to other people. If we all did that, then whoever was first to it would, you know, win every time, and that would be it. None of us would get involved in any of these hobbies. Look at it with admiration, though. Look at their content and look at it and say, I want to achieve that. And like, in terms of, I want to get there one day, but know that you're on your own journey and it is a long process. You know, finding your style, finding a particular, it could be color tones that you really enjoy. brushes that you really enjoy, textures or anything like that, and even just subject matter, whether it's like animals or landscapes or made up fictional characters, wait until it just falls into play, and it will do it as long as you keep at it. So keep your head down and enjoy the process and trust the process.
Definitely. Okay, so we've got one peculiar question that we always ask everyone, so I'm going to ask you. I think you came up with this question, so it's your fault.
I love it.
So if Procreate said you could only ever use one brush in the future, and it can be one of theirs, or it can be one that perhaps you've engineered or downloaded from somewhere, what brush would you confine yourself to if you absolutely had to?
I think I could get by and do the majority of content to a degree with the dry ink brush.
Right.
It is my favorite, but I would use it. I think I could create full designs with it comfortably, but also fine details with it at the same time. And that would be my brush of choice, 100%.
Fantastic. Well, that's all the questions. I've managed to get through the episode without, accidentally creating another blooper or, falling apart completely. So
I'm going to say it now. We have made no cuts in this at all.
Not yet.
So I would like everybody to put some clapping hand emojis in the comments down below, because James absolutely smashed it.
Well, I've got the outro to do now, so this is where I fall apart. But there you go. But that has been a fantastic episode. Thanks, Joel, for sticking with me.
No, thank you.
So, if you have any questions for us, there is a form down in the description area. You can fill that in and send that to us. And while you're down in the description area, don't forget to subscribe. You can also become a member, and that gives you perks. It gives you early access to, if this episode, if you're already a member, but, future episodes you get, I think it's about 6 days early, isn't it? Or 5 days earlier than everybody else. And you also get a little badge next to your name. And there's also one little comment that I had to refer to the screen to there. If you really like deep dives, then there will be another one on screen. I don't know which side it would be. Might not be anywhere near my finger, but yeah, it's on the screen somewhere if you want to watch another deep dive. So thanks again, everyone, for watching, and we'll see you again here next time. Bye for now.